Commander Veltar floated in his command chair, watching the stars drift past his ship's viewing port. His 8 eyes moved independently as he scanned the tactical displays around him. The Cytherian Empire had been expanding for over 2,000 cycles, and today felt like just another routine mission. "Sir, we have something," called out Science Officer Tekran from across the bridge. His tentacles danced over the holographic controls as data streams filled the air around them. Veltar's main eyes focused on the incoming information. They had discovered a small yellow star with several planets orbiting it. Nothing special about that. The galaxy was full of such systems. But the third planet from the star caught his attention immediately. "Look at this," Tekran said, his voice carrying excitement. "Perfect atmospheric composition, liquid water covering most of the surface, and those green and brown patches suggest plant life everywhere." The planet rotated slowly on the main display. Swirling white clouds moved across blue oceans. Vast continents showed different shades of green and brown. It looked exactly like the garden worlds that made the best colonies for the Empire. "Any signs of intelligent life?" Veltar asked, though he already suspected the answer. Planets this beautiful usually had some form of primitive inhabitants. "Yes, sir, but they appear very basic," Tekran replied. "We're picking up electromagnetic signals from the surface, radio waves, television broadcasts, and primitive internet communications. Their technology level seems to be what we would classify as early industrial age." Veltar studied the readings more carefully. The creatures on this world had discovered electricity and basic machines, but they still used chemical rockets and metal projectiles for weapons. Their largest cities held only a few million inhabitants each. Most of their planet remained undeveloped wilderness. "Show me their military capabilities," he ordered. The display changed to show various human settlements. Tekran highlighted different areas as he spoke. "They have ground vehicles that run on combustion engines, flying machines with rotating wings, ships that float on water using primitive metals. Their weapons shoot small metal projectiles using chemical explosions." Veltar's 4 arms gestured dismissively. "Laughable. Our personal shields can stop their strongest weapons. Our smallest fighter craft could destroy their largest cities." But something about the planet intrigued him. The settlements were spread everywhere, across frozen continents, in burning deserts, on small islands, even in dense jungle areas. Most primitive species stayed in comfortable zones, but these creatures seemed to live anywhere they could. "Interesting distribution pattern," he noted. "They've colonized almost every environment on their world." "Yes, sir," Tekran agreed. "Even areas that seem hostile to their biology. They've built cities in places with extreme heat, bitter cold, and dangerous weather patterns." The tactical officer, Morketh, looked up from his station. "Sir, should we begin the standard approach? 3 ships should be more than enough for initial contact and intimidation." Veltar considered this. The standard Cytherian conquest protocol worked the same way every time. First, they would make contact and demand surrender. Most primitive species gave up immediately when they saw superior technology. Those that refused would face a small demonstration of power. After that, resistance usually crumbled within days. "How many of these creatures are there total?" he asked. "Approximately 7 billion individuals across the entire planet," Tekran reported. Veltar's eyes widened slightly. That was more than expected, but still manageable. The Empire had conquered worlds with larger populations before. "Very well," he decided. "This world will make an excellent addition to our territory. The climate appears suitable for our colonists, and the native population can provide useful labor once properly controlled." He activated the fleet communication system. "All ships assume conquest formation. We will follow standard protocol. For primitive world acquisition, estimate completion time 3 rotations, possibly less if they prove cooperative." The Cytherian fleet began moving into position around Earth. 27 ships of various sizes arranged themselves in a pattern designed to be visible from the surface while demonstrating overwhelming force. Down on Earth, in observatories and military installations around the world, humans began noticing unusual objects appearing in their night sky. Radio telescopes picked up strange signals. Military radar systems detected large objects that shouldn't exist. In Seoul, Astronomer Minho stared at his computer screen in disbelief. "This can't be right," he muttered, checking his calculations again. In Moscow, Air Defense Commander Anya watched her radar display with growing concern. "Get me the general immediately," she ordered her assistant. In Washington, satellite monitoring specialist Jake felt his hands shake as he reached for the red phone. "Sir, you need to see this right now." But for most of humanity, life continued. Normally, people went to work, children attended school, families ate dinner together. They had no idea that far above their heads, an alien empire had just marked their world for conquest. Commander Veltar settled back in his command chair, satisfied with the day's work. Soon, this beautiful blue world would belong to the Cytherian. Empire and its primitive inhabitants would learn their place in the greater galaxy. He had no idea that he had just made the biggest mistake in Cytherian history. Communications Officer Telmar adjusted his translation equipment as the Cytherian diplomatic vessel positioned itself in Earth's upper atmosphere. The massive ship, gleaming silver against the blue sky, began broadcasting on every frequency humans used for communication. "People of the third planet," the message began in dozens of human languages simultaneously, "you are now subjects of the Cytherian Empire. Surrender your weapons and prepare for integration into our civilization. Resistance will result in the complete destruction of your world." Telmar expected the usual response: terrified pleas for mercy, followed by quick surrender. Instead, his communication board lit up like a festival display. Hundreds of different signals came flooding in from the planet below. "Sir, I'm receiving responses from many different groups," Telmar reported, his tentacles working frantically over the controls. "They all claim to speak for different parts of the planet." "What do you mean, different parts?" Commander Veltar asked. "Well, there's something called the United Nations trying to coordinate a response. But I'm also getting separate messages from places called China, Russia, the United States, India, Brazil, and over 100 others. They all seem to think they're in charge of their own territories." Veltar's 4 eyes blinked in confusion. "Primitive worlds usually have one dominant tribe or simple kingdom. How many leaders do these creatures have?" "I'm counting at least 200 separate governments, sir. And they're all asking for time to consult with their leadership and coordinate an international response." This was already taking longer than normal. Most primitive species either surrendered immediately or attacked with whatever crude weapons they had. These humans seemed to be organizing, stalling tactics, Veltar decided. "They're hoping to buy time to hide their leaders or important resources. We'll show them the futility of resistance." He opened a channel to his military commanders. "Deploy occupation forces to their 3 largest population centers. Make our presence impossible to ignore." 3 Cytherian transport ships descended through Earth's atmosphere like falling stars. The first headed toward Seoul, a sprawling city of nearly 10 million humans. The second aimed for Moscow, the heart of the largest nation on the continent. The third approached Washington, the capital of what seemed to be one of the most militarily active human governments. The plan was simple: land in the city centers, deploy a few hundred troops with advanced weapons, and wait for the humans to realize how hopeless their situation was. It had worked on 47 other worlds. In Seoul, the Cytherian transport touched down in the middle of Gwanghwamun Square. Citizens scattered as armored alien soldiers marched out, their energy weapons glowing with blue light. But instead of mass panic and surrender, something unexpected happened. Korean military units had already surrounded the area. Tank crews, led by Colonel Dae-ho, had positioned their vehicles behind concrete barriers. Infantry soldiers under Captain Ji-ho's command took cover in nearby buildings. Instead of primitive projectile weapons, they carried equipment that the Cytherians had never seen before. "Contact. Enemy forces are not retreating," the Cytherian squad leader reported back to his ship. In Moscow, the scene played out differently, but with the same surprising result. Commander Volkov had prepared his forces for urban combat, something Russians had been perfecting for centuries. His soldiers used the city's metro tunnels to move unseen, while his tank battalions approached from multiple directions. The Cytherians found themselves facing coordinated artillery strikes from positions they couldn't easily target. Every time they tried to advance, human forces would attack from a different direction. then disappear into the vast city before the aliens could respond. Washington presented its own unique challenge. General Hayes had mobilized not just ground forces, but air support as well. Human fighter jets screamed overhead, dropping precision munitions on Cytherian positions. The aliens' personal shields protected them from small arms fire, but the heavy explosives were causing real damage. "This makes no sense," Veltar muttered as reports flooded in from all three landing sites. "They should be terrified of our superior technology." But what disturbed him most was how differently each human force fought. The Koreans used hit-and-run tactics, striking fast and then melting away into the urban landscape. The Russians employed massive firepower, bringing overwhelming force to bear on single targets. The Americans coordinated complex multi-unit operations, with ground, air, and electronic warfare elements working together. "Sir," reported Intelligence Officer Kethmar, "it's as if we're fighting three completely different species. Their tactics, weapons, and organizational structures are all unique." "How is that possible?" Veltar demanded. "They're all the same primitive bipeds." "I'm analyzing their communication intercepts now," Kethmar replied. "They seem to have developed different military doctrines based on their geographical regions and historical experiences. The humans in cold climates fight differently than those in hot climates. Island dwellers use different tactics than mountain peoples." Telmar looked up from his communication station with growing alarm. "Sir, I'm intercepting military communications from around the planet. These three landing sites weren't isolated targets. They were coordinated responses to test our capabilities." "What do you mean?" "The humans have been sharing information about our weapons, our tactics, our vulnerabilities. Every military force on the planet now knows exactly what we're capable of, and they're adapting their strategies accordingly." Veltar felt a chill run through his alien physiology. On the tactical display, he could see human military units mobilizing across the entire planet. They weren't panicking or surrendering, they were preparing for war. "Sir, we're receiving another transmission from the planet," Telmar announced. "Put it through." A calm human voice filled the bridge. "Cytherian forces, this is General Park, of the United Earth Defense Coalition. Your demonstration of force has been noted and analyzed. We are prepared to negotiate, but we will not surrender. Withdraw your ground forces, and we can discuss terms." Veltar's confidence began to waver. This wasn't how first contact was supposed to go. Deep within the intelligence center of the Cytherian research vessel, Analyst Mordan sat surrounded by glowing screens filled with data that made his scaled hands tremble. As the Empire's leading expert on primitive species assessment, he had studied hundreds of civilizations before their conquest. But what he was discovering about humans was unlike anything in the galactic archives. "This cannot be accurate," he muttered to himself, cross-referencing the data for the fifth time. The numbers kept coming back the same, painting a picture so disturbing that he questioned his own analytical equipment. The historical records recovered from human databases told a story that defied everything the Cytherians understood about civilized development. Most species experienced periods of conflict, followed by long eras of peace as they matured technologically and socially. Humans were different, terrifyingly different. "Commander Veltar," Mordan called across the research bay, his voice tight with barely controlled alarm. "You need to see this immediately." Veltar, a seasoned military officer who had participated in dozens of successful conquests, approached with the casual confidence of someone who had never encountered a truly surprising enemy. That confidence began to evaporate as he examined Mordan's findings. "Their historical archives go back 15,000 years, Mordan explained, highlighting sections of the human timeline. "In all that time, there has not been a single decade without active warfare somewhere on their planet. Not one." Veltar studied the data with growing disbelief. "You're suggesting continuous conflict for 15 millennia. That's impossible. No species could survive that level of sustained violence." "That's what I thought too," Mordan replied, pulling up more detailed analysis. "But look at the patterns. They don't just fight in one type of environment or with one style of warfare. Their records show specialized combat techniques for every conceivable battlefield condition." The screens filled with examples that made Veltar's military experience seem almost quaint by comparison. Human warfare had adapted to every environment their planet offered. Desert combat techniques developed over centuries of conflict in the world's harshest wastelands. Jungle warfare perfected through generations of fighting in dense tropical forests where visibility was measured in meters rather than kilometers. Arctic operations, Mordan continued, highlighting another section. They've developed specialized equipment, tactics and strategies for fighting in temperatures that would kill most galactic species within hours. Mountain warfare in terrain so treacherous that simply moving requires advanced climbing skills. The data continued to reveal the terrifying scope of human military adaptation. Naval battles fought on and beneath their planet's vast oceans, with ships designed specifically for warfare rather than exploration or trade. Aerial combat techniques that had evolved from primitive flying machines to sophisticated aircraft capable of supersonic speeds and precision attacks. "Sir," Morden said quietly, "I don't think we're looking at a primitive species that happens to be good at fighting. I think we're looking at a species that has turned warfare into their primary evolutionary pressure." Meanwhile, on Earth's surface, something unprecedented was happening in the halls of political power. For the first time in decades, the planet's major political leaders were setting aside their differences to address a threat that transcended national boundaries. President Sun Ho of the Asian Coalition sat across a holographic conference table from Chancellor Eric of the European Alliance and Premier Sophia of the American Federation. These three leaders represented nations that had been economic and political rivals for generations, but the alien threat had changed everything. "The preliminary analysis is complete," President Sun Ho announced, his normally diplomatic tone replaced by urgent military precision. "Our intelligence services have coordinated to assess the alien fleet capabilities. We're facing technology approximately 2 centuries ahead of our current level." Chancellor Eric nodded grimly. "My defense ministers report similar findings. However, our historical analysis suggests this technological gap is not insurmountable. We've overcome similar disadvantages before through innovation and determination." Premier Sophia leaned forward, her expression reflecting the gravity of the situation. "The question isn't whether we can fight them. The question is whether we can coordinate effectively enough to present a unified response. Our species' greatest weakness has always been our tendency to fight each other instead of external threats." "Then we change that today," President Sun Ho declared. "I'm authorizing the immediate sharing of all military technology and intelligence between our coalitions. Chancellor Eric, Premier Sophia, are you prepared to do the same?" For the first time in human history, the answer was a unanimous yes. In underground research facilities around the globe, scientists who had spent their careers developing civilian technologies found themselves tasked with the most important military research project in human history. Dr. Yuna, a materials scientist who had been working on advanced composites for spacecraft, now found herself examining fragments of alien hull plating alongside her colleague Pavel, a nuclear physicist who had been developing fusion reactors for power generation. "The metallurgy is incredible," Yuna observed, running her fingers over a piece of alien armor that had been recovered from the first skirmish. "This alloy is lighter than our best titanium composites, but shows impact resistance comparable to our heaviest battleship armor." Pavel was equally fascinated by the energy signatures from alien weapons. "Their plasma containment technology is at least 50 years ahead of our most advanced research, but the underlying principles are similar to what we've been working on. For fusion power, can we reverse engineer it?" Yuna asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. "We're humans," Pavel replied with a grin that would have terrified any alien observer. "Give us something to fight against, and we'll find a way to build something better." Across the planet, similar scenes were playing out in thousands of locations. Factory worker Inho arrived at his job at the automotive manufacturing plant to find the entire facility being converted overnight. Production lines that had built civilian vehicles for decades were being retooled with military precision to produce armored fighting vehicles, weapons systems, and equipment designed for warfare against technologically superior enemies. "How long will the conversion take?" Inho asked his supervisor, watching as robotic systems reconfigured themselves with startling efficiency. 18 hours for basic retooling, came the reply. Full production capacity within 72 hours. We're not the only ones. Every major manufacturing facility on the planet is undergoing similar conversion. Inho nodded, feeling a mixture of excitement and determination that surprised him. Like most humans, he had grown up surrounded by stories of warfare, heroism, and technological innovation driven by military necessity. Now, for the first time in his life, those stories were becoming reality. The sleeping war machine of Earth was finally awakening, and the galaxy was about to discover what 15,000 years of continuous warfare had created. Humanity wasn't just another species with some military capability. They were a civilization that had spent their entire evolutionary history perfecting the art of survival through superior firepower, tactical innovation, and the absolute refusal to surrender. The Cytherians had made the mistake of awakening something that had been waiting for this moment for millennia. Retry. The first rays of dawn broke over Earth's horizon as Commander Veltar's massive invasion fleet descended through the atmosphere. This was the moment he had been waiting for, the final phase of what should have been a routine planetary conquest. His ships moved in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming with advanced armor and bristling with weapons that had conquered dozens of worlds before this one. All units commence planetary bombardment, Veltar commanded from his flagship's bridge. Target their major population centers and industrial facilities, standard subjugation protocol. The Cytherian commander expected to see the familiar sight of panic and chaos spreading across the planet's surface. Primitive civilizations always responded the same way to overwhelming force, with terror, desperate pleas for mercy, and the rapid collapse of their basic social order. Instead, his tactical displays began filling with red warning signals that made no sense according to everything he knew about military conquest. "Sir," his weapons officer called out, confusion clear in his voice. "We're detecting massive energy buildups across the planet's surface. These signatures match our own plasma weapons, but that's impossible." Veltar moved to examine the sensor, readings himself, certain there must be some mistake. What he saw made his confidence begin to crumble. Energy signatures identical to Cytherian military technology were appearing by the thousands across every major landmass on Earth. In Seoul, engineer Minho stood in a converted electronics factory that had been transformed into something that would have seemed like science fiction just weeks earlier. Around him, production lines that had once assembled consumer devices now manufactured plasma weapons that were not only identical to captured Cytherian technology, but actually superior in several key ways. Power efficiency is up 23% from the original design, Minho reported to his team, holding up one of the sleek energy rifles they had just completed. Range has been extended by 40%, and we've reduced the weapon's weight by half. His colleague Kyung-soo, who had been working on the targeting systems, added his own improvements. The precision guidance system is now integrated with our satellite network. These weapons can automatically adjust for wind speed, target movement, and atmospheric conditions. What the Cytherians didn't understand was that humans had a fundamental advantage in reverse engineering technology. They approached problems differently than any other species in the galaxy. While most civilizations would attempt to recreate alien technology exactly as designed, humans immediately began asking how they could make it better. Thousands of kilometers away in Berlin, researcher Anna was achieving something that should have been theoretically impossible. Standing in what had been a university physics laboratory just 1 month ago, she watched as the first human anti-gravity devices rolled off a hastily constructed production line. The alien gravity manipulation technology was actually less complex than we initially thought, Anna explained to her international team of scientists via holographic conference. Once we understood the basic principles, scaling up for mass production was straightforward. Her assistant Klaus activated one of the anti-gravity units, watching as a 2-ton piece of equipment effortlessly floated into the air. We can now produce these devices at a rate of 500 units per day. Every human fighter aircraft can be equipped with this technology within 2 weeks. Across the Pacific Ocean, Admiral Chen stood on the bridge of humanity's first faster-than-light capable warship, watching as his fleet prepared for something that would have been unimaginable just months earlier, taking the fight directly to the alien invaders in space. "All ships report ready for launch," his communications officer announced. The vessels surrounding Admiral Chen's flagship were marvels of human engineering combined with reverse-engineered alien technology. They were faster than the original, Cytherian designs, more maneuverable, and equipped with weapons that had been improved through human innovation. "Begin orbital assault," Admiral Chen commanded, his voice steady despite the historic nature of the moment. Humanity was about to engage in its first space battle, using technology they had learned to build by studying their enemies' weapons. Back on Veltar's flagship, the Cytherian commander watched his tactical displays with growing horror as another of his cruisers exploded under concentrated fire from the primitive planet below. The weapons destroying his ships were unmistakably based on Cytherian technology, but they were more powerful and more accurate than anything his own forces possessed. "How is this possible?" Veltar demanded, his voice cracking with disbelief. "They've only had access to our technology for a few weeks. It should take years to understand it, let alone improve upon it." Analyst Mordan, who had been frantically studying human society since the invasion began, provided an answer that chilled everyone on the bridge to their core. "Sir, I've completed detailed scans of the human population. What I've discovered explains their rapid technological adaptation." The main display filled with data that painted a picture more terrifying than any Cytherian military leader had ever imagined. "Every human civilian we've scanned shows extensive knowledge of military tactics and combat strategy. This isn't specialized knowledge limited to their warrior class. It's universal throughout their population." Veltar stared at the data in disbelief. "You're telling me their entire species has military training?" "It's deeper than training, sir," Mordan replied, his voice trembling. "Their children play games that teach warfare strategy. Their entertainment media consists largely of combat simulations and military scenarios. Their educational systems include tactical thinking as a standard curriculum." The implications were staggering. While other species treated warfare as a specialized skill practiced by a dedicated military class, humans had made it part of their fundamental culture. Every human had grown up learning to think like a soldier, to solve problems like a military strategist, and to approach challenges with the mindset of someone preparing for battle. On Earth's surface, this cultural foundation was proving its worth in ways the Cytherians couldn't have anticipated. Factory Supervisor Hannah watched as her converted automobile plant produced its 1,000th fighter aircraft of the week, each one incorporating improvements suggested by workers who had never built military equipment before, but instinctively understood how to make it more effective. "Production rate is exceeding targets by 40%, Hannah reported to the Global Defense Coordination Center. "Workers are suggesting modifications faster than our engineers can implement them." Her brother June, meanwhile, was training new pilots in combat maneuvers he had learned, not from military academies but from decades of playing strategic combat games for entertainment. "The transition from simulation to real combat is remarkably smooth," he reported to his squadron leaders. "Most recruits already understand advanced tactical concepts before they even enter the cockpit." This was the true horror that the Cytherians faced. They weren't fighting a primitive species that had recently acquired advanced weapons. They were fighting a civilization that had spent 15,000 years preparing every single individual for exactly this type of conflict. Every human factory worker understood manufacturing efficiency because they had grown up in a culture that glorified military-industrial production. Every human pilot instinctively knew combat tactics because they had been playing warfare simulations since childhood. Every human engineer approached problems with the assumption that whatever they built would eventually be used in battle. The sleeping war machine of Earth hadn't just awakened. It had revealed that it had never truly been asleep. Human civilization had been a weapons development program disguised as a peaceful society, and now the galaxy was seeing what 15 millennia of continuous military evolution had created. Veltar's invasion force was learning too late that they hadn't attacked a primitive world. They had challenged a species-wide military academy that had been waiting centuries for someone to test their lessons against. The retreat began at midnight, Earth time. Commander Veltar stood on the bridge of his battered flagship, watching, as the remnants of what had once been the Cytherian Empire's most powerful invasion fleet limped away from the Sol system. Around him, officers who had entered this campaign with absolute confidence now worked in stunned silence, trying to process a defeat that should have been impossible. Of the 200 vessels that had arrived to conquer a primitive world, fewer than 60 remained functional. The rest had been destroyed or so badly damaged that they had to be abandoned in Earth's orbit, where human salvage teams were already moving in to strip them of every useful component. Navigation, set course for Cytherian Prime, Veltar ordered, his voice hollow with the weight of explaining this disaster to the High Command. Maximum sustainable speed. As the surviving ships activated their faster-than-light drives and vanished into hyperspace, they left behind something unprecedented in galactic history, a primitive species that had not only defeated a superior technological force, but had grown stronger through the process. On Earth's surface, the transformation was complete and irreversible. President Sunho stood in the rebuilt Sol Command Center, surrounded by technology that would have seemed like magic just months earlier. The facility had been destroyed during the initial Cytherian bombardment, but the rebuilt version incorporated alien technology in ways that created something entirely new. Beside him stood Chancellor Eric and Premier Sophia, the former rivals who had become close allies through the crucible of interstellar warfare. The political landscape of Earth had been permanently altered, not through conquest or revolution, but through the simple necessity of survival against a common enemy. "We've learned much from our uninvited visitors," President Sunho said, gesturing toward the bustling research centers, visible through the command center's reinforced windows. Perhaps more than they intended to teach us. In those research facilities, teams of scientists led by Dr. Rena and Professor Victor were making discoveries that would reshape humanity's understanding of physics, engineering, and their place in the universe. The captured Cytherian technology had provided a roadmap to scientific advancement that would have taken centuries to achieve independently. The energy manipulation principles are elegant in their simplicity, Dr. Rena explained to the assembled political leaders via holographic projection. Once we understood the basic concepts, scaling them up for human use was straightforward. We've actually improved upon several of their designs. Professor Victor nodded in agreement, highlighting sections of complex mathematical equations floating in the air before them. Their faster-than-light technology operates on principles we had theorized but never tested. Now that we understand the mechanics, we can build drives that are more efficient and more powerful than the original Cytherian designs. The proof of their success stood in Earth's orbital shipyards, where engineer Kyung Ho presented humanity's first indigenous faster-than-light drive to a gathering of military and scientific leaders. The device was sleek, compact, and incorporated improvements that made it superior to the alien technology it was based on. Test results exceed all expectations, Kyung Ho reported with barely contained excitement. Our drive is 30% more efficient than captured Cytherian units, with significantly faster charge times and greater range capabilities. Admiral Lisa, who had been coordinating the construction of humanity's first interstellar fleet, studied the technical specifications with the eye of someone preparing for future conflicts. The Terra Defense Fleet represented everything humanity had learned from their alien visitors, combined with their own innovations and improvements. 16 heavy cruisers, 48 destroyers, and over 200 fighter craft, Admiral Lisa announced to the Global Defense Council. All equipped with human-improved versions of alien technology, the fleet will be ready for its maiden voyage within the week. The speed of human adaptation had been breathtaking. In less than a year, a species that had never traveled beyond their own solar system had built a fleet capable of interstellar warfare and equipped it with weapons more advanced than those of their former enemies. Meanwhile, in Cytherian space, the High Command was struggling to comprehend reports that challenged everything they believed about galactic civilization. The emergency session had been called within hours of receiving Veltar's preliminary battle reports, but the full scope of the disaster was only now becoming clear. The humans reverse-engineered our plasma weapons in 3 weeks, one analyst reported, his voice barely steady. They improved our anti-gravity technology in less than a month. They built their own faster-than-light drives in 6 weeks. Fleet Admiral Zektar, veteran of dozens of successful conquests, studied the tactical reports with growing disbelief. This timeline is impossible. No species can advance this rapidly without centuries of gradual development. Sir, another analyst interjected, Commander Veltar's cultural assessment suggests that human civilization has been unknowingly preparing for interstellar warfare for millennia. Their entire social structure appears to be organized around military efficiency and technological adaptation. The implications sent shockwaves through the Cytherian leadership. They had encountered a species that didn't just wage war, they had evolved specifically to excel at it. Every aspect of human society, from their entertainment to their education to their industrial capacity, had been shaped by 15,000 years of continuous conflict. The High Command's response was swift and unprecedented. Within hours, an official warning was transmitted to every known civilization in the galaxy. Sol system inhabitants classified as militarized Death World civilization. Approach with extreme caution. Standard conquest protocols ineffective. The I-time warning spread through galactic communication networks faster than any news in recorded history. Species that had never heard of humans suddenly found themselves learning about a new type of civilization, one that treated warfare not as a necessary evil, but as their greatest cultural achievement. As the warning reached the farthest corners of known space, Captain Gina stood on the bridge of humanity's first interstellar exploration vessel, watching as Earth fell away behind them. The ship was one of 24 vessels, launching simultaneously from Earth orbit, carrying human crews into the galaxy for the first time in their species' history. Navigation, set course for the Proxima Centauri system, Captain Gina ordered, her voice steady despite the historic nature of the moment. Let's see what else is out there. But this wasn't a mission of peaceful exploration or scientific discovery. The humans were venturing into space with a very specific purpose: to find other species that had been conquered or oppressed by the galactic empires, and to teach them what Earth had learned about fighting for freedom. The galaxy had made the mistake of teaching humanity about the stars and showing them that there were other worlds filled with intelligent life. Now humanity was about to return that favor by teaching the galaxy something they had perfected over millennia of constant warfare. The war machine factory of Earth had finally learned to reach beyond its cradle, and the universe would never be the same. What had started as an attempted conquest had become the beginning of a galactic revolution, led by a species that had spent 15,000 years preparing for exactly this moment. The stars belonged to humanity now, not because they had conquered them, but because they had earned the right to explore them through superior firepower, tactical innovation, and the absolute refusal to surrender. End of story.